SVC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
The month of June was closed by the Gaming in Spain conference taking place in Madrid, which saw delegates tune in for a long-awaited update by the regulatory authority of the DGOJ. In attendance, iGaming Daily reports on Spain's regulatory progress and whether its ambitions can match the high technical demands sought by federal authorities on customer care, fraud, and under-21 protections. The iGaming Daily podcast is brought to you by Optimove, the leading CRM and marketing solution for the global gaming industry. I'm Ted Menmuir, and joining me today is Christian Lee, business journalist for iGaming Expert. Christian, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Like I say, just got back from Madrid, so not quite as warm here in the UK, but still not too bad.
Okay, so let's jump straight into it. And look, it was a busy week last week, and conference. You know how conferences are like. So just provide kind of your general overview of the Gaming in Spain conference and what were its narratives and themes that brought to audiences.
Yeah, it was a really insightful day in Madrid. There was a range of speakers from across the industry, which was good to see. So there's like regulators, operators, some industry analysts as well. So sort of those in attendance and myself, we got to see the perspective on the current status of Spain's market from a wide range of viewpoints. It was good. Like the main narratives, which we'll go into more detail, is definitely around regulation. It's a little bit of a crossroads at the moment with the DGOJ really pushing to get some new amendments to current regulations, and it's just a case now of waiting to see what happens with them.
So yes, and it has been quite a long wait. And I'd like to just shout out William Van Oort, because I think when he does conferences, he kind of really offers that wide perspective on things and also kind of distinct opinions of what's going on in the market. Now, going on, let's focus on kind of this regulatory progress in Spain. Where is Spain's market as stands in terms of its regulations, and what is it trying to achieve?
Yeah, so there's three main points that the regulators are trying to achieve at the moment. One, they're reconsidering the rules around deposit limits. So at the moment, deposit limits, there's a weekly, monthly, and daily deposit limits that are per operator, but they want to change that to cross-platform. So the spend across different accounts will be taken into consideration with the limits. They're reconsidering what they're going to do regarding advertiser restrictions, because before they brought in some pretty strict advertising restrictions with them, which were then repealed last year. So it's a case of what's the next step with them. And then also finally, the DGOJ, developing a new risky behaviour algorithm to detect players who may be at risk of problem gambling. And that's something that they were really keen to push. And once complete, will mandate that operators use this algorithm on their platforms.
So it's been kind of a strange path of Spain, because I mean it triggered its regulatory process very early in 2020, at the start of the decade, pretty much. And the first stage was very much focused on advertising and consumer protections, and in a way it was kind of the one of the lead European nations to kind of take on overhauling its gambling framework. How has that kind of been received by the operators and the commercial side of the industry?
Well, I think one thing that I found really interesting to find out when Mikel Arena, who is the Director General of DGOJ, spoke, was that the algorithm that I mentioned, that they are developing this because operators are supposed to use their own risky behaviour detection algorithms, but it's something that very few, maybe 2 or 3 operators are actually implementing themselves, which kind of shows that the DGOJ doesn't really have that bite to properly enforce certain rules, which is maybe why things have sort of slowed down a little bit, because they don't have sort of the authority that they would like to have in terms of sort of pushing things forward and making sure that operators are following things as the Royal Decree states.
So even in that process, talking about the DGOJ, I mean, they've undertaken significant changes in the way they're governed. I think they used to be governed by the Ministry of Justice, and now that's their overview is now moved to the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. How's that kind of impacted their governance of Spanish gambling?
Yeah, I think, again, as I say, it looks like it's on somewhat comes down to the DGOJ, and in terms of do they have that sort of authority to be able to push the government to make the changes that they want to put in place. I mean, even in terms of advertising restrictions, they're looking at maybe the back end of 2026 before anything gets done. So it really looks like it's a case of that within the government and within the DGOJ, there isn't sort of the mechanisms in place to really push things forward at a rate that you would maybe expect in other places.
So in the conference, Michael Arana gave this actually quite long-awaited update on to delegates. And how was that taken? And what was their kind of response to that?
Yeah, so it was definitely an interesting response. As you say, it's not really addressed the industry in a while. The message from Arena himself was around that the Spanish market is growing in a positive direction, but there is some issues around risky behaviour, especially among young people. He did really emphasise that the DGOJ is trying to work with operators rather than against them. But this was something that when speaking to some people afterwards, they sort of told me that the DGOJ isn't really that communicative with operators within the industry, and they don't really listen to what they're saying. I thought it was interesting as well that after Arena made his speech, he didn't really stick around to listen to what other people had to say or sort of speak to operators or people in the industry. I appreciate he's probably quite a busy man, but yeah, it was interesting to know after saying that he wants to be more sort of like create a better relationship. He was sort of gone as soon as his speech was done, and it was the first of the day, so he didn't really get to see anyone else speak.
Do you think that the DGOJ has kind of harmed its regulatory process by announcing these very big kind of technical projects, but when they went to kind of technical consultation, they've kind of been stumped? Do you think that's part of the problem?
Yeah, I do, because I think what it does is, I think as a sport, it leaves operators in limbo because they get told, oh, these changes are coming into place, but they don't know when that's going to happen. So once they know that some sort of technical regulations coming in, they're trying to prepare for that. They're trying to sort of adjust their platform to make sure that it's ready for the new changes. But if you don't know when that's going to happen, there's only so long you can sort of wait before you're forced to make changes to keep up with the market. So I think it's definitely a tough situation for operators to be in, to be sort of waiting around for what looks like the middle or back end of 2026 before they'll find out what the sort of the future is for the market.
Do you think the operators are still kind of frustrated by kind of the major interplays or the major points of conflict in Spanish gaming?
Yeah, definitely could sense a lot of frustration within the market itself.
Thanks, Christian. We're just going to head into an ad break, and when we return, we're going to talk about the trajectory of Spanish gambling.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Okay, so from this update given by Mikel Arana, I mean, what do you think are the key projects that the DOJ is trying to kind of prioritize in the coming future?
I think it's definitely this algorithm that we've mentioned. It gave quite a detailed breakdown of how the DGOJ is working alongside sort of different academics and using sort of scientific data to create an algorithm that is intended to identify when a player is engaging in risky behaviour. And I think it is quite interesting because you see a lot of the times that operators or regulators bring in these detection systems that use sort of arbitrary measures or arbitrary thresholds when someone can reach, whereas this seems to be is taking characteristics from previous examples of problem gambling, and it's found sort of a range of variables and a range of player types that exhibit different behaviours, which can then be sort of put up against current behaviour to identify when someone may be running into trouble. And I think it could really be something that is used elsewhere outside of Spain, because it can be applied elsewhere because of the fact that the variables aren't Spanish specific. They can definitely transfer to other areas. So I think that's the main thing that they are pushing to bring in as soon as possible and make sure operators are using it.
Interesting. And another area I want to pick your brain on is Spain is another one of these states that is kind of prioritizing under 24 and under 21 protections. What are they, and how do they kind of align with what we're seeing in other markets?
Yeah, so I think the protections will come into play somewhat with this argument that we've mentioned. Age will be one of the factors that comes into it. It was interesting that Iranian's speech really did highlight the problem in terms of young people gambling. In his talk, he produced some stats that showed there's a significant number of people at age between 18 and 25 that lost over €3,000 last year, which I guess it can be seen as a concerning figure, because I don't know too many 18 to 25-year-olds myself that can really afford to lose that much amount of money in a year on gambling. I think what they will do will sort of be aligned with other areas. You see that when it comes to things like deposit limits, some countries have looked to reduce deposit limits for that age group. Now, Spain haven't said that themselves, but it may well be something that they are considering. So I think the things like deposit limits, advertising restrictions as well, they are likely to focus on things like social media influencers and social media marketing, which obviously is something that is more popular within the younger demographics. So again, that's an area that I think they'll really focus on to try and make sure that young people are gambling responsibly.
So I want to kind of take you back to 2021 when Spain implemented kind of a blanket ban and started to kind of impose these quite hardcore kind of consumer protections, especially with the deposit limits. Do you think we're coming to kind of a trade-off where, okay, if they're going to go and take a high technical command with the algorithms, do you think that the DGOJ or the Ministry of Consumer Finance, or the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, do you think there's any kind of trade-offs where they might lessen the commands or the compliance commands on deposit limits or advertising?
I think it's something that they will need to consider, to be honest, because some of the conversations that other people had on the various panels was around the fact that it's okay bringing in these tighter restrictions, but at the same time, you need to maintain a good player experience within the regulated market to prevent people going to the black market, because there's no point bringing in really tough restrictions if that then just forces people out of the market. As we've seen in other areas, like with the Netherlands when they brought in the deposit limits, I think the sort of rate of people going to the black market has increased rapidly because of that. So it's something that they have no choice but to look at, because they want as many people in the regulated market as possible. No regulator wants a black market to thrive, so if they're not taking that into consideration, they're going down a dangerous route.
And overall, I mean, Spain's still a growing market. It's still, tax effective. But what is kind of the operator's view of what's going on in Spain? I mean, it's still a commercially viable market compared to other European counterparts.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, a few people I spoke to, they see there's a lot of potential there, especially on the online market, because Ed Birkin from HD Capital, I believe, he produced some data on the market, and only about 24% of it is done online at the moment.
Right, yeah.
So, which is relatively low compared to a lot of other comparative markets. So that's an area that has a lot of potential for growth. Also, as well, in terms of sports betting, Spanish people tended to bet domestically in terms of football and things like that. They'll bet on La Liga, or they'll bet on international football games involving Spain, but there wasn't too much volume on things like the Premier League. So if an operator can get in there and really push their online platform and push betting on the markets, and there's a lot of room for growth in them areas.
Very interesting, very interesting. So finally, Christian, I mean, Spain, moving market, how are you going to kind of monitor developments in the coming months, and what should audiences expect?
I think audiences should expect a lot of changes in the next sort of 3 to 6 months, just with what we've discussed regarding all the regulations. It's coming to a point now where operators need to know what the next steps are, and operators need to know what they will have to comply with going forward. So it's definitely a case of what I will be doing, and what our listeners should be doing is keeping an eye on what announcement from the DGOJ. There'll be no doubt more updates in terms of this algorithm, in terms of what they decide on deposit limits and ultimately advertising restrictions as well. So like a lot of markets, we do say that it's a case of waiting and seeing, but I think things are happening pretty imminently. And
as always, you can follow Christian's work at iGaming Expert and on SBC News. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.